Hulk Hogan is my favorite wrestler of all time. He was the reason I became a wrestling fan. He's the reason I stayed a wrestling fan for so many years. To me, when it comes to professional wrestling, Hulk Hogan is where it begins and where it ends for me. And you can say whatever you want about that. Have at it. However, with that said, the wrestler that I admire the most, the wrestler that I have the greatest level of respect for, the wrestler that I would actually fight over the most wouldn't be Hulk Hogan. That wrestler would be The Undertaker. When I think about The Undertaker, I think about that guy that was always there, that calm, kind of steadying force. Good old Mr. Reliable, if you will. And now it's funny. After all of these years, I can look back and say, I've watched Taker in the WWE for almost 25 years now. He's been there through every phase of my life as a professional wrestling fan, watching WWF/E, the Hogan era, that New Generation era, the Attitude era, the Ruthless Aggression era, the PG era. He's been there for all of it, and he's been at the top through all of it. He's had a run that you could argue is unprecedented by anybody in WWE history, including Hulk Hogan. When I think about Taker, I look at somebody from the outside looking in that I say, that is a professional wrestler. If I was trying to break into the professional wrestling business, that is who I want to be like. That is who I want to emulate. That is how I want to conduct myself. That is how I want to carry myself. That is the attitude that I want to carry towards the professional wrestling business. When I think about those guys that have almost universal respect and admiration in professional wrestling, that list is very, 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 very small because of politics, because of jealousy, because of pettiness, because of heat, what have you. It is very, very rare that you hear somebody say something terrible or bad about The Undertaker. Usually the guys that fit into that category more so by and large are the Owen Harts and the Eddie Guerreros. And I sometimes think that part of the reason those guys get that type of treatment is because they're dead. Taker's still alive. And he gets that type of, reverence, if you will. So it's been heartbreaking over the past couple of years to see the slow decline of The Undertaker, especially in his physical abilities. Also understanding that time catches up with all of us and that he's reaching the end of the road. And I've known this and I've come to deal with it and I'm trying to learn to accept it. For younger fans, they might not understand yet because maybe their guy hasn't reached this fork in the road, this crossroads, this point in time in their career, but someday you will. But for fans of my generation, or maybe fans that are a little bit older than me, I think you get it and you understand what I'm getting at. It's hard because you see Taker as like that last bastion of your childhood. You see The Undertaker as that last bastion of when wrestling was really good. You see him as the representation in a lot of ways of so many things that were once good about professional wrestling that can be again. So that's why so many older fans like me in particular gravitate towards Taker whenever he does make an appearance, even if he does only wrestle once a year. It means something to us. It's special to us because of who he is, what he has done, and what he ultimately represents to not only us as fans, but the business and the WWE as a whole. So it pains me to see this guy basically being a broke down shell of himself. And that realization really hit me at WrestleMania 30. And while I'll never get over the fact that the streak was ended, and in particular more so not just the streak was ended, but the way it was done, how it was done, who it was done by, and the follow-up to it, I'll never get over that. You'll never be able to tell me that that was well thought out. You'll never be able to convince me that that was a good decision. That's just the way it is. But the reality is I saw a Taker that's old, that's beaten up, that's worn down, physically, frankly, is kind of torn down. I mean, we're talking about a guy, frankly, that only has to wrestle one match a year. And in that one match a year, over the past few years, he's been unable to avoid serious injury during those matches. And this match at WrestleMania 30 against Brock Lesnar, it looked like an early concussion that he tried to work the rest of the match through. I mean, that's bad. When you get to the point where you can't do that thing that you were once better than maybe anybody at without getting hurt, without making yourself look bad, maybe it's time to stop doing that. And I understand that from an athletic standpoint or from a performance standpoint, it's hard to know when, and it's hard to just walk away. You don't want to. You know you only have so much time that you'll be able to do it, so you want to make sure you do it as long as you possibly can. It's who you've been for so many years. It's what you grew up being. It's how you became a man. It's been so many things about your life. It's hard to just turn your back and walk away. I get that. I understand that. I appreciate that. But it is heartbreaking whenever you see athletes go through this. You see great athletes, I think of like a Jerry Rice, who was so dominant and so great for so many years. And then he kept playing, and then he kept playing. And then you get to the point where the Denver Broncos back in the mid-2000s didn't want anything to do with him. That's sad to see. To see that once great dominant player be not even good enough to make an NFL roster. That's tough to take, surely for the player, and tough for the fans to accept as well, because you realize that that time has come, and it's hard to accept it. However, I think it is time to accept the fact that Taker is no longer that Taker. It is time to accept that all good things must come to an end, and it is time for the Undertaker to just leave, to retire, to walk away. Now, on the one hand, I think about all these great things, all of these great moments and great matches that Taker has had over the past 2+ decades, and it makes me sad to think that that could all be at an end. It makes me sad to think that I might not ever see him in a WWE ring ever again, especially if he all of a sudden just decided to say, that's it, I quit, I've had enough, it's time for me to enjoy the rest of my life. That'd be tough to take. But I can tell you what will also be tough to take is seeing The Undertaker come back every year just for WrestleMania season like he has done for so many previous years in a relatively predictable pattern, and see him wrestle 1, 2, or 3 more matches at WrestleMania where it's just like what he did at WrestleMania 30. He's slow, he's physically beat up, and while he has it from a psychological standpoint, he just can't get it done at the same level he just once did. And it only gets worse. And then instead of having this great catalog of a career to look back on with The Undertaker, I'm looking at those recent memories of him, and it just taints everything for me a little bit. That's the lasting impression. That's the lingering image that I have. And I know for me, selfishly, I don't want that. Now, at the end of the day, The Undertaker makes his own decisions, and he's his own man. And he has earned the right, in my opinion, for sure, beyond question, regardless of what any asshat, whether it's me or anybody else says, to decide when he wrestles, who he wrestles, how often he wrestles, and if and when he decides he wants to walk away. If anybody has ever earned that right to do just that, it is The Undertaker. But I really hope that this is the end. I really hope that I don't see him wrestle ever again in the WWE. Because now the streak is gone. Something that I had invested in, over the course of 2+ decades, in particular over the past decade, it's now gone. The one real reason I had to see The Undertaker every year at WrestleMania is now gone. And following that up with the fact that you look at how old and beaten down he is, how little he can actually do anymore, the fact that him coming back now just feels kind of repetitive and just feels kind of predictable, and all the while knowing that, if he goes from Brock Lesnar, he loses there, and then he wrestles a Bray Wyatt and he loses there, or maybe a Sting even, as much as the old school nostalgic fan of me wants to see that, if he loses to a Sting, I don't want to see that. I want to see Taker go out on a high note. And I don't know, frankly, if he ever can at this point. because I don't see where it's going to get any better than what he had with Brock Lesnar. I think it could only go downhill from here. And as a result, looking at the fact that the streak is over, looking at the fact that it has frankly gotten to be kind of repetitive, honestly. Taker just coming back and doing the same thing every year, just working a program heading into WrestleMania and then exiting stage right until the next year. Looking at how physically beat up he is, how old he looks, how worn down he has to be, and the fact that I know that things can't get a whole lot better, they're only going to go downhill. I'd rather stop the bleeding and cut the losses now and say, Taker, thank you for everything that you've done, but please just retire. The time has come. It really, truly has. You have given more to this company and to this business maybe than just about anybody in the history of the company or the business. You have earned that right to go enjoy your life with Michelle McCool. Go make a bunch more babies if that's what you decide to do. Enjoy being a dad. Enjoy being a grandpa. Do all of that. Be able to actually physically do that. I just don't want to see Undertaker wrestle anymore. That time has come. It's a bitter pill for me to swallow as a Taker fan of almost 25 years now. It's a bitter pill for me to swallow as a guy who's looking to somebody like a Taker to be that representation still, that last remaining active representation of what so many things that can be good about professional wrestling and still could be again. But I don't want to see Taker anymore as a shell of his former self. And even as I was watching him heading into WrestleMania 30 and that storyline with Brock Lesnar, and even as I was watching that match at WrestleMania 30, even I was starting to sit there and say, it just isn't the same. And he's not the same. And I don't want to remember him like that. But if he keeps wrestling and having several more WrestleMania matches where he either loses or wrestles and doesn't look very good doing it or gets hurt, so it affects the quality of that one match that he has to have every year, it's going to taint his legacy in my mind a little bit, because I'm going to be focused on what happened at the very end of his career. And while I'll always remember and respect and admire and appreciate all the things he's done throughout the body of work of his career, it's going to be that lasting impression at the end, that last impression that he left. That's not going to be a very good one. And I don't want to see him fall into that Hulk Hogan category. I don't want to see him fall into that Ric Flair category. I want to be able to remember him for the peak years, for all the great things that he's done over the years. Just like, frankly, I would like to be able to do with Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. And even though you can to a degree, there's always that part that lingers about what they did at the very tail end and the fact that they hung on for way too long. It's sad. It's really sad to think about. But I now understand and realize that, frankly, I just really don't want to see Taker anymore. And I really don't want to see him wrestle another match at WrestleMania. The streak is gone. Why bother? There's no more reason. Yeah, the WWE might be paying you a huge downside guarantee and expecting you to perform, and maybe you don't want that to be your lasting legacy, your last impression on fans in the ring, that match at WrestleMania 30. But maybe it is time, and maybe it should be, because maybe it's not going to get any better, and in fact, it could get worse. I guess we'll find out in short order whether or not Taker is going to come back to work a match at WrestleMania 31. But at this point, I sincerely hope he doesn't. And I sincerely hope, frankly, that I never see him wrestle again in the WWE.